On the program today, we welcome back the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. So flattered you can carve some time out for us today, Mr. Vice President. I know you're going to be swamped. Welcome back to the program.
Back on.
You bet. I guess the first place to start here would and there's so many places I could ask you about the meeting with Putin and so forth, but really I think forefront of people's minds right now is health care and the status of the bill in the Senate. And, the overriding question, how in the world can it be this hard when it seemed easy when Obama was in the White House? All of these repeal bills were voted on, knowledge that he would veto them, of course. But where does this stand now? If this doesn't get done, this has consequences I don't even want to contemplate.
Well, look, it has to get done, Rush. Obamacare is putting a tremendous burden on working families, on small businesses, on the American economy. Every single promise that President Obama made to get Obamacare passed has been broken. You remember them. You covered them better than anybody else. If you like your insurance, you can keep it. That wasn't true. That wasn't true. That if they adopted Obamacare, the cost of health insurance would go down. We've seen the cost of health insurance rise in every state across the country. In some cases, 200% and more are hurting. Congress must act. The House of Representatives has done its job. And in the coming days, the President and I are absolutely determined to roll our sleeves up and work with the men and women in the Republican majority in the Senate and pass legislation that will repeal and replace Obamacare and our nation's health care back on a pathway built on respect for the doctor-patient relationship, free market values, and the belief that states are the laboratories of innovation and reform, and allow our states to reform Medicaid in ways that will best meet the needs of our most vulnerable.
Name names. It would be helpful if you did, but I know you won't. But what are the options? We've got 52 votes, plus yours if necessary, if it come down to that. But I hearken back that the way you just laid it out, what is so complicated? How could anybody disagree with what you just said?
Well, I think it's always in the details. And look, there's that old saying, Rush, if you like sausage, don't go where they make it, right? So if you like lawmaking, don't go where they make it in Washington, D.C. It's tough. I mean, Obamacare is literally imploding before our eyes. I mean, you have large areas of the country where people are down to only one choice in insurance, and in some cases, people have no choice in health insurance as a direct result of the collapsing failure of Obamacare. And so the challenges have to do with the complexity of this disastrous policy launch, and the best way for us to turn this national policy back in the direction of freedom. But it all begins with elements of this bill. Remember, while this legislation doesn't do everything that we ultimately want to do, the president's committed to ultimately allowing Americans to buy health insurance across state lines, the way they buy life insurance, the way they buy car insurance.
Nobody's talking about. See, that's a great focus. That's so far down the road.
Yeah.
It's not even in the Cruz Amendment.
Right. We have to do it, but the reality is the budget rules that we're using to pass this bill with just 51 votes don't allow us to make that kind of a substantive change in the law, but the president's absolutely committed to it. But in this legislation, Rush, we accomplished enormous things. You remember 7 years ago when you were covering day in and day out when Obamacare became law. To me, the most onerous aspect of Obamacare, the most onerous to you, the federal government for the first time ordered the American people to buy health insurance, whether or not. I mean, that's not a policy built on the American principle of freedom. I mean, that a government mandate to every American that says you have to buy health insurance or you have to pay a tax penalty to the government, that goes away in the bill that's before the United States Senate and the one that's in the House. The mandate goes away, the tax increases go away for reform, that health savings accounts are greatly expanded so that people can become health care choices. But to your question, what's standing in the way is just obviously every member of Congress has their own opinion and work with each member to address their needs. But we are very close, Rush. If I had one message for your tens of millions of listeners around America is this is the moment. Now is the time. If you're one of those Americans who want to see Obamacare repealed and replaced, we literally are days or maybe just weeks away from being able to accomplish that historic objective. But it's going to take every American within the sound of my voice who wants to see us start over on healthcare reform built on freedom and federalism and state-based reform to let their voice be heard, let their elected officials know where they stand. And the President and I and our whole team are going to continue to work with the Senate, and I think we're going to get it done.
Ted Cruz last week about his amendment, interviewing him for the next issue of my newsletter, and there are three mandates that are in Obamacare, and most people are only aware of two. When you use the mandate term, there's the personal mandate, which you just talked about, which defiles the Constitution. Then there's the employer mandate, and in the current Senate bill, those go. Those are both gone, which is great. But the third mandate is the Title I section of the bill, which
the regulation,
the Obama essential health benefits. Which now, am I correct in saying those were added by those specific mandates are in this bill?
Well, they were added as a part of Obamacare. Before, all of health insurance was regulated at the state level.
Okay, so they are part of the legislation.
They're absolutely part of Obamacare.
And they can't. What Senator Cruz told me was that there's no stomach to get rid of those on the Republican side, or not enough.
Well, the president made a couple of commitments on the campaign trail, and we worked to keep those when the bill passed the House, which is if your